source of what was being checked at the Port of Montreal, and clearly that was insufficient. We raised this as a motion at Transport Committee today, voted down by the Cover-Up Coalition. And so, more talk by politicians and bureaucrats, more hot air is not going to solve this problem. Action is.
Questions et commentaires, questions and comments. I have a member for Sarnia-Lambton.
Mr. Speaker, and what a great answer from my colleague. Now, I understand that our leader is visiting the Port of Montreal because apparently when it comes to cars that have trackers on them, they can tell that they've gone to the Port of Montreal almost overnight and are shipped away to foreign countries. And clearly we need more resources there to detect and to retrieve these cars. Would the member like to elaborate?
Oh, okay, here. I'm going to pause this because I've been on this. I'm like, well, what the heck? Why are there no air tags? It's just like these Apple air tags. And I guess Pierre is on it. He's going to find out, well, why? Because they're being able to detect where these... I'm sorry, I'm a little bit loud. I'll turn it down. They'll be able to detect where these vehicles are going. Question period is starting in it's 4 minutes. Boom. Well, like, they're not doing anything about it? They just see where they're going to the port, and they're like, yeah, okay, well, let's watch them go. I guess no one cares because the insurance is taking care of it. Obviously, the insurance doesn't mind it too much, or are they piping up about this, and that's why we're seeing it? I don't know. Leave your comment on the side. I just wasn't fully aware of it, but I'm in, like, a rural area, and there's a guy... breaking in cars. He had a pink truck around here, and then that's what we have. That's the kind of crime. Whereas in cities, I guess this is a big deal. This car theft. I thought it was a San Francisco deal, but yeah, air tags. So we're going to hear more about this from Pierre Poilievre as he's gone to Montreal. So that means maybe he's not going to be in question period. Because I know Trudeau's showing up today. That would mean that other people will get a chance to take, lack of a better term, pot shots at Trudeau in question period. Okay, let's get back to the action. Enjoy. Air tag it.
Lambert.
Sure, and I'll admit that I wasn't aware what Apple tracking devices were until my wife introduced them. That we've used them in our luggage and tracked down a luggage lost at going through airports in Canada, another federal transport issue, of course. But we've seen, and I've spoken to constituents who have used those trackers and seen the trend, the movement of their stolen vehicle from their driveway to Montreal and out of the Port of Montreal. And we know that is the source of the problem, which is why our leader is there. And he's made some very specific recommendations about enforcement through the CBSA, cutting the consultants and the waste so we can put more resources into that, and the use of the scanners, the technology. So one scanner exists right now at the Port of Montreal. It doesn't work half the time. We need dozens of scanners, not just one.
Reprise de débat, continuing debate. The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General. 7 minutes or so.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'm very pleased to rise to speak on this very important issue. Auto theft is a critical one that is impacting Canadians. As a GTA resident, as a GTA member of Parliament, I have heard from my constituents, friends and neighbours about fear of theft and increased risk in their communities. I can assure each and every one of those individuals right across the country that I take these concerns very seriously, and I'm determined to address this problem alongside the Minister of Public Safety, the Minister of Transport, and other colleagues. What is certainly not helpful, Mr. Speaker, is spreading disinformation and stoking fear, even in this very chamber. It is disappointing, but in fact unsurprising, that the Leader of the Opposition and his colleagues across the way have taken this very tactic. To start, let's discuss what we've actually done to address the issue of auto theft on this side of the House. En décembre, nous avons renforcé le...
We now have funding to fight organized crime. Last week, we increased our efforts in order to fight guns, firearms,
funding that on the night of a marathon vote initiated by the opposition, the leader of the opposition in its infinite wisdom returned to cast a direct vote against guns and gangs funding. So let the record be clear about which side of the House is actually supporting guns and gangs funding to keep our communities safe. J'étais ravi d'assister.
I was delighted to be at the side of the Minister of Public Safety and Premier Doug Ford and others who are contributing to fight auto theft. And this was a week ago in the GTA. Further, we are working with provinces, insurers, car manufacturers, and other key stakeholders to come up with a coordinated approach to fight auto theft. And there will be a meeting this Thursday.
Out videos, Mr. Speaker, as a result of a news release by our government that they decided to read, and they repeat childish slogans, Mr. Speaker. We have a plan to keep communities safe. I want to point out that the very bill the Leader of the Opposition has weaponized on this issue, a bill I was pleased to work on as the Parliamentary Secretary at the time to the then Minister of Justice, a bill called Bill C-75, actually raised the maximum penalty on summary conviction for motor vehicle theft from 18 months to 2 years. So let that sink in, Mr. Speaker, and for everyone who's watching right now. Either the Leader of the Opposition doesn't understand the criminal code, or he's purposely misleading Canadians. Either way, his objective is to repeal Bill C-75 and therefore lower the maximum penalty for motor vehicle theft. If it sounds a bit illogical, Mr. Speaker, that's because it is. Additionally, a pillar of his so-called plan, Mr. Speaker, is to add an aggravating factor on sentencing to this issue. Mr. Speaker, as I said yesterday in the House, and as I'll repeat today, the criminal code actually already includes this provision. 718.2 sub A sub 4 specifies as an aggravating factor allowing for a more increased sentence an involvement with organized crime. Mr. Speaker, I'll be sharing my time with the member for Vaughan Woodbridge.
Yeah,
I
agree here.
This is a critical
I'm sorry, I'm pausing it. Arif, he is. I should say his full name. But he. Okay, so what we had today, in earlier in the day, MP Scheer, who was the speaker, stood up and said, "Hey, during question period, Pierre Poilievre was speaking, and he said exactly the point that when he was speaking, and." He apparently it was caught on tape. The Minister of Justice, the Honourable. So he has made 49 appointments since becoming Minister of Justice, and he became Minister of Justice in July 26, 2023. I didn't realize that it was that long. I just thought it was David Lametti has retired as Nature. Is that how I say it right? Snaky Lametti. I like Lametti because everyone was scared of him. I think he did all these things and people were like, except Cooper, but he's the only one. But anyway, so Arif Virani, apparently, this is according to MP Scheer. He made a point of order. He made a poo. Said the Justice Minister told Pierre Poilievre off, basically, and he requested for an apology and a what is it? A formal apology, and that he'd be reprimanded or something. Arif Virani, this is question period, and it's a bit of drama. It's a part of it. Okay, I'm cool with that. I think it's fine because there's. Remember that they're doing about 12 hours a day of really dry stuff. People find it very dry, and then there's the Senate. It's very dry, and it's getting less dry, but I like it. But this is 1 hour during the day where they can let off some steam. It's not, to me, is good. And it helps. I think it's good for the country, too. Those that are frustrated see that someone's yelling their frustrations out for them. They don't have to do it. That is what I believe is the purpose of it. That's why I believe in the Westminster system. It gives a chance for somebody to be appointed to be the town yeller. Anyway, so I think Arif is going to be another one on fire. Yes, I agree here. So not sure again. He easily rages. He is raging, and I think I don't know if it's not like I don't want to say an act, but I think, when he gets down to business, it's not like he's a hot-headed person. I don't believe. Tron, they get paid thousands of dollars to act like kindergarten. Yes, for this 1 hour, it's for the plebs. It's for the people who believe that yelling at someone will make things better. That's part of it. Who it's for, It's not necessarily for and probably for them too, right? Because I imagine they're very stressed, not getting their policies on. I agree that politicians need to get raises. It's an unfortunate thing, but if you don't pay them enough, they're easily corrupted. They're easily bribed. And this is basically 101 essence. Well, I won't name any company names, but it's many international companies 101. They're like, yeah, find the highest ranking underpaid person in a country and bribe, get things done. It's just 101. And there's all the other ways of doing it. You can have lots of police, but if you pay them, they kind of police themselves. If you're not, paid enough, there's more problems. Show business for ugly people. Yeah, it is. It's to be great actors, but I like this better than what's going on in Hollywood. Personally, that's my opinion. It's always been mine, and I prefer them. Now let's watch. I'll watch this, and then we're going to go live. We're only a minute behind because I've been talking.
We know that the majority of auto thefts are not one-off crimes committed by first-time offenders. Auto theft is most often coordinated through an operation of organized crime networks. What are we doing with respect to those organized crime networks, Mr. Speaker? We're cracking down, as the police have asked us to, on organized crime and the financing of organized crime. How are we doing that, Mr. Speaker? We've got the Fall Economic Statement being debated in this very House. It's a bill called C-59. That bill contains provisions to crack down on money laundering, to stop the organized criminals that are making our communities unsafe. What has the Leader of the Opposition done in his infinite wisdom? He's directed every one of his Conservative colleagues to vote against that measure, to vote against measures that will keep our communities safe, and to basically empower organized criminals. Illogical? Yes, Mr. Speaker, very illogical. In a video posted just this morning, the Leader of the Opposition threw the CBSA under the bus for failing to solve the issue of auto theft. What he conveniently failed to mention in a very polished video, very professionally done, is that under his watch, when he was part of the Conservative government at the cabinet table, they cut 1,000 jobs from the CBSA. If one of the problems with this, which we will be discussing at the Auto Summit, is border security, I'm not sure how you keep the border safe when you're cutting employees from working at the border. Illogical, Mr. Speaker? Indeed, very illogical. In addition, the Conservatives routinely vote against bolstering CBSA funding. They talk out of both sides of their mouth on this issue. Canadians watching right now deserve a heck of a lot better, Mr. Speaker. Je suis toujours ouvert.
I will always welcome any good faith suggestions about changing the criminal code, but we have to be serious in working to make our streets safer. I hope
members of the official opposition is any sort of leadership on this issue. Instead, I'm dealt with. I see trifling slogans, and I see redundant suggestions about how to amend the criminal code with provisions that are already there. Mr. Speaker, Canadians deserve a lot better from that opposition. Merci beaucoup.
Wow. Who is this guy? He does not. Does that feel like a liberal up there? Okay, Kevin does this every day. But Kevin is no. This is a cabinet minister, knew his talking points, it seemed. He was looking at that paper. And I'm not saying I'm going liberal, this and that. I'm talking about this individual MP who I believe has taken it up quite a bit. Like he had some actual points that they made sense. He knew his file. He's got a bald spot. I don't care. He does. You got to dig somehow. But he did. I think he is going to be. We're going to see more of him. We're going to see more of them because the Liberals, that talking procedure of talking, like spacing your words, it's very frustrating to most people, and a lot of people tune out. But this is, I think. Well, I don't know. What do you think? Leave a comment. I think it's funny. It's nice to see it. What is it? Mathieu Belanger. It's a nice tap. It should be commission-based, paid by performance. I don't think. Well, they do get paid by performance, Mathieu. Hello, RV. Oh, yeah, Matthew. They get a baseline pay, and then if they're on a committee, they get more money, and then if they're on another committee, they get more money, and then if they're a cabinet minister, they get more money, and then if they're a shadow cabinet minister, they get other monies. So there's all kinds of, and there's other things, all kinds of delegations and things to do. So a baseline is, they're like 106. Not very great money, but then they can make more money on the other sides. It's not a millionaire. It's not a Hollywood job, but we're scrutinizing them as if they were. That's why I always try to be balanced. So I'm going to go live. Okay. Who is this SW? Everyone seems to know you. Good.
Buy groceries.
All right, we're live now.
On April 1st, this Liberal NDP government will quadruple the carbon tax, further driving up the cost of living and making the lives of all Canadians more expensive. New data shows that after 8 years, violent crime has increased by 39%, homicides by 43%, gang murders have more than doubled, and violent gun crime has increased year over year. A common-sense Conservative government will ensure that repeat violent offenders remain behind bars while awaiting trial, and we will bring back mandatory jail time for serious violent crimes. Right. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we want to axe the carbon tax, build homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime with jail, not bail. Mr. Speaker, let's bring it home.
Here, here. Bring it home. Then I have Deputy de London West, the Honourable Member from London West.
Happy Black History Month, Mr. Speaker. Storytelling is one of the tools used by Black communities to pass down our ancestors' experiences, their struggles, their successes, and the values that are important and worth keeping. So allow me to share the story of 800 Black families that lived in Strathcona, BC in the 1900s, the center of Black families that was later displaced by the City of Vancouver through the patterns of segregation, but today has secured a land trust agreement that allows them to rebuild on what was lost. Or Africville, Nova Scotia, where members of the Black community were displaced in the same manner, and the last home destroyed in 1970. But today, this story is shared in the Africville Museum for visitors around the world to learn about past Black history in Nova Scotia. Africville and the Black community in Strathcona are some of the examples of the long history of racism and discrimination in Canada. And so when we celebrate the strides of the Black Canadians, it's important to remember why. So take pride in celebrating the barriers that we are breaking as a government. Martin Luther King said that we must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. Black history is Canadian history. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Happy Black History Month. The Honourable Member from Mission Maskey, Fraser Canyon.
Mr. Speaker, this NDP Liberal government is just not worth the cost. And after 8 years, Canadian businesses are struggling to survive. The latest report from the Office of the Superintendent of Bankruptcy alarmingly revealed that business insolvencies increased by 41.4% in 2023 compared to 2022. It's no surprise Liberal policies have attacked small businesses since they entered office. Small businesses are drowning in debt, red tape, high taxes, high rent, and they are struggling to stay afloat. Statistics Canada continues to report that more businesses are closing their doors than are opening. While the Liberal negligence has made life more expensive, Conservatives will continue to propose common-sense solutions that provide relief to small businesses without driving excessive inflation. Let's bring it home.
The Honourable Member from Portage-Lisgar.
This NDP Liberal government is in denial. We are in a cost of living crisis, yet they have no shame once again hiking the carbon tax on April 1st. They don't care about the 2 million Canadians who regularly use food banks. They don't care about the 50% of families who are $200 away from insolvency. And they really don't care about forcing farmers who feed us to pay thousands of dollars in carbon taxes. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, it has never been more expensive to eat, heat, and put a roof over your head. Right. The worst part is that even the Liberals now acknowledge that their costly carbon tax serves little purpose. By their own admission, they don't track the amount of emissions reduced by the carbon tax, proving once again that this is a tax plan, not an environmental plan. Right. It's time for this costly coalition to rediscover reality. People are hurting. People are struggling, and they cannot afford more tax grabs. Conservatives will keep fighting to axe the tax on everything, for everyone, and for good.
The Honourable Member for Sherbrooke.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, this week is Suicide Prevention Week in Quebec. It's a time to remember those who tragically took their own lives, and especially to remember the importance of being able to quickly access hotlines. This year's campaign encourages people to dare to talk about suicide despite fears or discomfort. Canadians need to be able to quickly access suicide prevention services. They need to be able to trust that they are not alone and that help is available. In Sherbrooke, the GV team is always there. If you are thinking about suicide, or if you fear that a loved one is facing suicidal ideation, you can call or text 988 anytime.
Before I recognize the next member, I'm going to ask members if they could please keep their conversations down so that the speaker can clearly hear the statements that the members are making. The honourable member from Nanaimo Ladysmith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My riding of Nanaimo Ladysmith on Vancouver Island is surrounded by marine-sensitive ecosystems, including ancient clam beds, southern residential killer whales, and wild Pacific salmon. As waters continue to warm, our oceans and coastal communities need all the help they can get. Despite this, consecutive Conservative and Liberal governments have left derelict and abandoned vessels to sink, polluting oil, fuel, plastics, and more into our waters. The impacts are detrimental to food security, wildlife, public safety, navigation, and local economies. Still, these vessel graveyards are increasing at a rapid pace. We know that local organizations, First Nations, and more are eager to do the work. They just need a federal partner. It is time that we see this government move forward with a real plan to prevent and remove these vessels from our waters and support my bill C-3444 to finally clean up this mess.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Berthier-Masquinongé. I rise to mention the presence today of our dairy producers, especially those from Quebec who are on the Hill today to meet with parliamentarians. These dairy producers are proud to offer their excellent products at a stable and reasonable price. That is why they're asking for support for Bill C-282 in order to ensure that supply management will remain stable and sustainable. They hope that the Senate will quickly pass the bill. By defending our supply management system, we will be protecting our human-scale regional agricultural system, as well as our national food security. And that will also enable our producers to invest in R&D and in constantly improve their productivity and the quality of their products, while reducing their environmental footprint. Thank you for getting up every day to make sure that we have quality dairy products. We always enjoy your delicious products.
The honourable member from Barrie Springwater, Oro-Medonte.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government, car thefts are up 34% across Canada, and a vehicle is stolen every 6 minutes. According to the Liberals' government's own news release, auto theft in Toronto is up 300% since 2015, and Statistics Canada data shows auto theft is up 216% across the entire GTA since 2015. And what happened in 2015? This Prime Minister happened. After 8 years in power, this government has not done a single thing to crack down on car theft. In fact, they've made life easier for the criminals who steal the cars from hardworking Canadians and the overseas organized crime syndicates that profit from their actions. Thanks to this Liberal government's catch-and-release policies, these career car thieves face zero repercussions. The Prime Minister has caused this auto theft crisis to happen under his watch. Ports are federal, the RCMP is federal, the CBSA is federal, the Criminal Code is federal. The Prime Minister is responsible for this crisis, and he is just not worth the cost. Only a Conservative government will stop the crime, protect your property, and bring... The
honourable member from Sault Ste. Marie.
Speaker, it gives me great pleasure today to rise to acknowledge 30 naval and officer cadets from the world-renowned Royal Military College of Canada who have come to Ottawa today. The delegation is led by one of my best friends, a veteran of the war in Afghanistan and professor at the RMC, Dr. Donald McFarling. Throughout the day, these fine cadets have met with government and official members. They've met with the Minister of National Defense. They've met with astronauts, and I believe they've also met with you, sir. They came to the capital to gain a deeper appreciation of the role of their representatives and the government that they have sworn to protect. These cadets have made a commitment to serve the country and live by the Royal Military College motto, truth, duty, and valor. They rise early, study hard, and train even harder because in a few short years, many will be sent to foreign shores to represent Canada and enact the decisions that we make in this very House. Speaker, we will owe them all a debt of gratitude. Today, I ask my colleagues to acknowledge these great people.
I would like to remind the member from Sault Ste. Marie, who is an experienced member, of course, that there is not a recognition from the floor of the House of Commons. It comes through the chair after, and make sure that it follows the procedures which have been clearly established in this place. Oral questions. Questions orales. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The previous common sense Conservative government succeeded in cutting in half the amount of cars stolen, all while bringing down the cost of bureaucracy. This Prime Minister, though, is not worth the cost, nor is he worth the crime, nor is he worth the cost of the crime after 8 years. He has made bureaucracy balloon. Meanwhile, the Canada Border Services Agency are only inspecting 1% of containers. Will he follow my common sense plan to reduce bureaucracy and consultancy fees and to have more Border Services agents and scanners? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, organized crime is involved in car theft in Canada. That's why we gave Ontario $121,000 to fight organized crime and car theft. The Conservative Party, though, voted against giving that money to Ontario. We are fighting money laundering as well. The Conservative Party is going to vote against that. Canadians are wondering why that party leader is defending organized crime rather than fighting car theft. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has made Canada the capital of organized crime and money laundering. And yes, it's true that he is spending a lot more money. The money he's spending is making bureaucracy explode and balloon. And this is for managers who cannot manage what they're responsible for. My common sense plan is to fire consultants and invest in border services agents and scanners to properly scan all containers leaving Canada in order to stop car theft. Will he follow my common sense plan? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, here's the reality. When we formed government in 2015, we had to undo the firing of thousands of border services agents that the Harper government cut. We had to rehire them. He is always suggesting cuts. Meanwhile, we are investing to fight money laundering, to fight organized crime. The Conservative Party seems to vote against all these initiatives.
The opposition.
What we cut was auto theft. We cut auto theft by 50% under the previous common sense Conservative government. And he's right. We did it at a lower cost to taxpayers. And he's also right that he reversed our reduction in auto theft because it has exploded by 32% since he took office, just as the bureaucracy has exploded. He has not put it into frontline officers. In fact, at the Port of Montreal, there's only 5 of them to inspect 500,000 containers, only 1% of which get inspected. Why won't he cut the high-priced consultants and bureaucrats and get boots on the ground?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
it would be more credible what the Leader of the Opposition was saying if he hadn't voted against sending $121 million to the province of Ontario to fight against organized crime and car theft. If he hadn't announced that he's voting against our fight against money laundering. Mr. Speaker, he still has time to change his perspectives and get behind our initiatives to fight organized crime, to fight auto theft, and to stand up for Canadians. He cut thousands of jobs under his previous government from border services. We've invested in them, and we will continue to.
The honourable member, the honourable Leader of the Opposition.
I'll say it softly and slowly so the Prime Minister can understand. We cut auto theft by 50%, right, by half. Yes, while reducing the cost of the bureaucracy. And yes, we are voting against him putting hundreds of millions of dollars more into high-priced consultants and back-office bureaucrats that don't stop crime. My common sense plan will scan every container going out of the 4 biggest ports and put 75 border agents to do the inspections on the ground. Why can't we have more boots on the ground and fewer bureaucrats in offices?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, again, he talks about boots on the ground, but the government he was part of, that he's taking credit for now, actually cut thousands of jobs of boots on the ground at the Canada Border Services Agency. We've continued to step up to support Canadians. They like to mention C5. It is a bill that kept mandatory minimum penalties for car thefts on the books. They mention C75, which is a bill that raised maximum penalties on car theft. We're going to continue to invest in fighting money laundering, and we hope, and organized crime, and we hope that the Conservatives change their mind and vote with us to crack down on organized crime.
Again, I'm going to ask all members, please, to restrain themselves as they can listen to the questions and to the answers. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's hiked the cost, he's hiked the crime, he's not worth the cost, and he's not worth the crime after 8 years. He's also not worth the hypocrisy. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has been claiming for months that he had no involvement in or knowledge of the invitation of a former Nazi soldier to the visit of the Ukrainian president. Now we know that he personally invited that same individual. He actually said the opposite. And he said that the former speaker had to resign over doing the exact same thing. So will he hold himself to the very same standard and admit that he's not fit for office?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The attacks that the Leader of the Opposition is choosing to make against the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress demonstrates the extent to which this Conservative Party no longer stands with Ukraine. They have an opportunity in just a few minutes, Mr. Speaker, to stand and vote in favor of a free trade deal that Volodymyr Zelensky himself is asking this House to pass, and he is choosing to not stand with Ukraine, not stand with Ukrainians, and not stand with Ukrainian Canadians. Why are they abandoning Ukraine?
Order. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Yesterday, the Bloc Québécois tabled its bill to remove the religious exemption, which allows one to be hateful using religion as an excuse. Violent people have used the excuse of religion recently in order to support a terrorist organization. This time, though, will the Prime Minister vote to eliminate this religious exemption when it comes to hate speech and incitement to violence? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr.
Okay, I want to know, does anyone know more about this? I'm going to have to look into it because someone was in the comments today about this, and I just said something roughly. So this seems to be a hot topic, and if everyone knows more about it, please let me know.
Speaker, I fully agree with my honourable colleague. I agree that hatred and glorification of violence are totally unacceptable. The Minister of Public Safety is in constant communication with the RCMP. Local law enforcement will not hesitate to take action if necessary. Canada is a country governed by the rule of law and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We, as Canadians, need to stand united against hatred, no matter what form that hatred takes. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. In order for law enforcement to act, they need to be enabled to do so by law. Last time, the Prime Minister denied it, sent the issue back under the rug, said that freedom of expression is an important freedom, as he just did. But this religious exemption, though, we have sought to fight it in a bill to criminalize hate speech. But it's not a crime currently because people can use religion as an excuse. Will the Prime Minister support our initiative? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, in Canada, all forms of hatred and glorification of violence are unacceptable. Our law enforcement agencies and our legal system are working very hard to, in fact, eliminate hate speech and glorification of violence. We recognize how important it is to defend the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms and the rights of all Canadians. We do not stand for hate speech or glorification of violence. That is always unacceptable.
South. The Liberal government, the Prime Minister promised to tax the excess profits of corporate grocery stores if they fail to stabilize grocery prices. Well, they failed to stabilize prices, and the Liberals again broke their promise. The Liberals announced instead another study on food prices. Canadians don't need another study to know that they're being gouged by corporate greed. It turns out we've learned the Liberal housing minister received thousands of dollars in donations from none other than the Sobeys family. Is that why they're protecting their wealthy friends?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, more competition means lower prices, more choice, and more innovative products and services for Canadians. Our government has just passed new legislation that empowers the Competition Bureau to hold grocers accountable and prioritize consumers' interests. The Fall Economic Statement also cracks down on predatory pricing, and I urge all parties to vote in favour of that. Canadians are watching and counting on each and every single one of us in this House of Commons to keep supporting them.
Then I have
the Honourable Member for Burnaby South. Today, the Liberals bragged about announcing another study of grocery prices. Canadians don't need another study. Canadians need prices to go down. The minister promised to tax excess profits, but the minister broke their promise. The housing minister received thousands of dollars in donations from the Sobeys family. Is the minister breaking the promise in order to make the IGA CEO happy? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, when there is more competition, Canadians have access to lower prices, more choices, and more innovative products and services. Our government just adopted an act so that the Competition Bureau can demand that grocers and grocery chains give them information and protect the interests of consumers. We are fighting against excessive and abusive prices, and I encourage all members of this House to support our legislation. Canadians are watching us. They are counting on the support of every member of Parliament here in this House of Commons.
Hill.
After months of feigned outrage and apologies on behalf of everyone else, a new report by the Globe and Mail shows that the Prime Minister's office invited a Nazi to his diplomatic reception in Toronto. He blamed the Speaker, saying that he acted alone. He's saying he had no idea about any of it. He called for him to take responsibility. He watched him resign, and yesterday he tried to blame the Ukrainian Congress. After all of the embarrassment all over the world, why is he above the rules that he applies to everyone else?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, what we're talking about is some name that came from a community organization. Obviously, the Prime Minister had no knowledge of this, but here we know what is happening over here. We are voting today at third reading on the Canada-Ukraine free trade arrangements. Mr. Zelensky stood there and asked us to pass this. Their opposition to this bill is a moral failing of historic proportions in response to an effort to support our friends in Ukraine and repel the Russian invaders.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
What an embarrassment it must be for the House Leader to have to clean up the Prime Minister's mess every day. The invitation had the Prime Minister's name on it. It came from him, and for months he said only the Speaker invited him. It turned out not to be true. His own House Leader said that the invitation merited a Speaker's resignation. The Speaker resigned because of him, and all of them watched him do it. So will the Prime Minister be subject to the rules that he imposes on everyone else?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Again, Mr. Speaker, another small conflagration to mask their larger historical moral failing of not supporting the people and the armed forces of Ukraine and the President of Ukraine, who stood in this very chamber not months ago and asked us to support the Canada-Ukraine free trade arrangements. Then they voted against Operation Unifier and support for our troops that once again supports Ukraine. What is next, Mr. Speaker, and why will they not stop trying to hide their moral failings?
There are several experienced members of this House who do know that their time to speak will be recognized by the chair when they are supposed to speak. Otherwise, I ask you, please, to allow questions and to allow answers to be given so that the Speaker can hear it and so can anybody else who's participating here. The honourable member from Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And that was a shameful answer from that member, Mr. Speaker. Another day, another international
I'm going to pause for a second. I'm sorry. I just want to know, okay, what happened here? Does anyone know what happened with, there was a Coots? Did the Coots, leave it in the comments, Coots plead out? I don't know. This thing about this fella being invited, it'll be good. Oh, yeah, the not guilty plea, April 26th. That's all I got. Oh, updated 38 minutes ago. 2 Coots, 4 members agree to plea deal. Oh, so they pleaded guilty. Yep. 2 Coots. So it just says, okay, this is from the Western Standard. Breaking someone news, not me. Okay, so it is 2 Coots. This is just awful. Sorry, whoever wrote this. You did a great job. But 2 Coots, 4 members plead to guilty. So still don't know what that means. Okay, Coots, 4 members. Chris Lysak, Jerry Morin have accepted a plea deal in their conspiracy to commit murder. The word from attendees, so I recommend you check out the Western Standard. Advertising for them, I have obviously no affiliation. The word from attendees at the trial is that the conspiracy to commit murder on RCMP charges have been dropped and the 2 men will be set free. I will confirm the court's case on so they've taken a plea deal. A plea deal. I see. I don't know courts. I'm sorry. I'm breaking this. I'm stopping what's going on. The words from attendees at the trial is that the conspiracy to commit murder on Tuesday have been dropped, and 2 of the men will be set free. Commit murder on RCMP charges have been dropped. On the other hand, and then they're saying a new lawyer guilty to weapons charge. Okay, Chris and Jerry pled guilty to restricted weapons charge, and Jerry pleaded guilty to weapons trafficking. So they pleaded out. So they pleaded to those things, and then they dropped murder of a police. Okay, so there's 2 of them that are going to... This is what it seems like. Please, on the comments, I can't see them right now. But let me know. Two of them, it seems, are let off, and one is, or two of them are still being charged. I think from that, let me know.
After months of denials and throwing the former speaker under the bus, now we learn that it was the Prime Minister who invited a Nazi to a reception with President Zelensky. He forced the speaker to resign, to take the fall, so he could avoid responsibility and cling to power. After 8 years of this Prime Minister, he is not worth the cost to Canada's reputation. Why did the Prime Minister invite a Nazi to a reception with the Ukrainian Prime Minister?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
The community event was held with the President of Ukraine, to which over 1,000 people were invited. In fact, some Conservatives were invited to that, Mr. Speaker. But we're not talking about any of that today because they care about this. They're pretending to care about this. This is fake outrage. Why? Because today we are voting on trade arrangements with one of our closest allies, the people in the country of Ukraine who are repelling as we speak and dying against Russian invaders. This is a moral failing of historic proportions, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Mégantic-L'Érable. The Prime Minister just keeps misleading this House. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister told this House on September 27th that he had no idea that a former Nazi would be involved in the events surrounding President Zelensky's visit. But now we know that the Prime Minister had personally invited that Nazi to his private reception in Toronto. He said that the Speaker of the House should resign for inviting a former Nazi to the House of Commons. After 8 years, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's relationship with the truth is pretty skewed.
This to me isn't going to connect. It's one guy who's 95 years old.
And
okay,
ask
so I'm going to pause
himself
for a
to
second
resign?
again, because whatever. I kind of don't think that's going to catch. He was 90 or 100 years old, and I looked into his into his record. I don't think it was. He was defending his country, and he left. I don't know. Maybe it was worse, but I don't think it is. On the other hand, so this is another thing from the Western. Bezergan said Coots, so this guy, 4-member, so Tony Olenek has a new lawyer. So one of them has a new lawyer. Bridge City News. Oh yeah, I like Bridge City News. This Hal Roberts, I watch that all the time. It's a small town. He's pretty good. I like Hal. Well, I like watching his show. Acknowledge 2 of the court's 4 will be released this afternoon after pleading guilty to a single charge each. So they probably said something. Chris Lesnick pled, unless this is all. It doesn't say all charges are dropped. Just 2 of them. So 2 of them, it seems, got a lesser charge, pled out, are let free, will be let free, and the other 2 they will focus on, I believe. Conspiracy to commit murder. Wow. So that's what we have. And this is just, sorry, I wish I didn't actually look into it because it's not real news yet. It's rumor and speculation.
Conservatives are talking about this.
Proper news.
Why are we talking about this in the House today? It's because they are about to vote against a historic agreement between Canada and Ukraine at a time when both countries want to strengthen each other and strengthen their trade ties. We want to support them to get Russians out of their native land. This is a moral failure from the Conservatives, but they're trying to hide their moral failure when it comes to supporting Ukraine by bringing up this new issue. So will they stop their moral failings and vote in favor?
From Wellington, Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, there's been a breakdown in law and order in this country. Over the last 8 years, auto thefts are up 34%, violent crime 39%. Canada has become a foreign interference playground for the PRC, for Iran, and for Russia. And behind all of this is organized crime, money laundering, and terrorist financing. In fact, in a U.S. indictment unsealed last week, Iran hired 2 Hells Angels members in British Columbia as assassins. When is this government going to get serious about crime in this country and start protecting Canadian citizens?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada.
Mr. Speaker, I've got a lot of respect for the member for Wellington Halton Hills, but I ask him to reflect seriously on the vote he's going to cast on the fall economic statement. The fall economic statement deals directly with the money laundering that is fueling organized crime. We know that auto theft and so many other crimes right now are being committed and orchestrated by organized criminals. We have the ability to get tough on their financing structures and break down those organizations. That member hopefully has the rectitude to address that issue and vote against his leader's instructions and vote in favor of the fall economic statement.
The honourable member from Wellington Halton Hills.
Mr. Speaker, Bill C-59 will do little to combat the problem of organized crime and money laundering in this country, which the government's own estimate says are $133 billion a year, equal to 5% of GDP. This government has ignored numerous reports and protected lawyers from money laundering and terrorist financing law and failed to crack down on Canada's big banks and their funneling of money laundering and terrorist financing through our financial system. So when is the government going to subject lawyers to federal law and start cracking down on our big banks and the gobs of money laundering going through our financial system?
I like MP Chong. His rhetoric is getting a lot better, too. He was too calm before. Now he's...
Speaker, again, I would ask that member to use the reason for which he is known in this chamber and reason and think about the votes that he is being asked to cast and the votes that he has already casted. What am I talking about, Mr. Speaker? We know that from police forces around this country, they are asking for resources. We've dedicated resources to guns and gangs, $121 million last week. Yet that member, under the guidance of his leader, was instructed to vote on an all-night voting session against guns and gangs funding. That is not becoming of that member nor of that caucus.
The honourable member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, the three Federalist parties voted against requiring bilingualism for commissioners reviewing miscarriages of justice. The Liberal Parliamentary Secretary and the NDP justified abandoning bilingualism because it would hinder the hiring of unilingual francophone commissioners. Oh, come on. Unilingual francophones have never benefited from bilingualism taking a back seat. Believe me, Mr. Speaker, are these parties really trying to tell us that it's impossible to find 9 bilingual and competent jurists among 40 million Canadians? The Honourable Justice Minister and Attorney General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, judges in Canada are incredibly important. The work that they do is incredibly, extraordinarily important. Requiring bilingualism is a priority, not just for judges in Quebec, but for judges everywhere in Canada. When we took office in 2015, we reviewed the process of appointing judges, and we made bilingualism a priority for us in assessing candidates. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Well, the Parliamentary Secretary is clearly not following the Minister's instructions. Another excuse for abandoning bilingualism, apparently it's too expensive, it seems. Yesterday, Radio-Canada revealed that it had obtained a copy of a letter from the Privy Council stating that it would take years and cost a lot of money to translate the documents submitted to the Rouleau Commission. Radio-Canada revealed that even the production of an index would be very expensive. So this raises 3 questions. First, how much is bilingualism worth? Second, how much is Canada prepared to pay for it? And third, above all, have you ever heard anyone here complain about the cost of translating from French into English? The Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, first, I wish to thank my colleague for his question. I acknowledge that francophones and francophiles across the country are feeling frustrated about this. A final report of 2,000 pages may not be able to be translated because the Commission received 200,000 documents, so that's hard to translate, but it doesn't necessarily make the situation acceptable. So we need to learn a lesson from this and do better in the future. The Honourable Member for Pointe-de-l'Île. What we are witnessing here is a trend towards erasing francophones from Canada. We see it in the justice system, as my colleague pointed out. We also see this in appointments, like the appointment of Governor-General Mary Simon. We are witnessing this also at major events, like the Hockey All-Star Game and the Grey Cup. I appeal to all other parties. if they are incapable of fighting the erasing of francophones, if they tolerate and even promote excuses to abandon bilingualism and the French language, what choice do they leave Quebecers but to become independent? The Honourable Minister of Employment and Workforce Development. Order, please. The Honourable Minister of Employment and Labour Force Development. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that on this Tuesday, the Bloc's looking for a language-related fight. But you know, Mr. Speaker, when I arrived at the St. Jean campus in Alberta in 1988, I could not speak French, and now I'm Minister for Languages. In both official languages, because I learned French and I'm here for French, and I am the proof that bilingualism is working very well in Canada. Order, please.
I'm certain we all want to hear the honourable member. The honourable member from Miramichi Grand Lake.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of soft on crime policies, this Prime Minister has created the auto theft crisis. According to the Liberal government's own news release, in New Brunswick, car thefts have spiked by 120%. It's time to stop the crime. Will the Prime Minister reverse his soft on crime, catch and release policies that have caused the auto theft crisis?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, our government obviously takes the increase in auto theft extremely seriously. That's why we have invested in a very significant way in the Border Services Agency and the RCMP to work on organized crime. Mr. Speaker, when we formed the government, we found out the Conservatives had cut 1,000 officers from Border Services. That's a lot. And half of the Border Services officers that work on criminal intelligence to interdict the export of, for example, stolen vehicles. Good news, we reversed those cuts. We've invested more, and we're going to continue to do more to deal with this issue.
The honourable member from Miramichi Grand Lake.
Mr. Speaker, the results are in after 8 years. There were 5 agents working at one port, 5 people. This Liberal government has let organized crime run rampant in Canada. The Prime Minister is not worth the cost or the crime. His reckless policies have caused an explosion in car thefts. He's responsible for the ports. He's responsible for the RCMP and the criminal code. These are federal responsibilities. Car thefts have spiked 190% in Moncton, 93% in St. John. Will this Prime Minister finally reverse his soft on crime catch and release policies?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I can assure my colleague from Miramichi that what this government will continue to do is crack down on auto theft and organized crime. So they like fancy slogans where they make up little catch and release. He's from Miramichi, New Brunswick, Mr. Speaker. He knows that applies to salmon angling, not serious criminals. So just because he repeats the silly phrase doesn't make it true, Mr. Speaker. Our government will do what's necessary with provincial partners, local police, to crack down on this. We've invested in the CBSA and the RCMP, and we'll continue to do more.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister and this government, car theft has doubled in Montreal. The Canada Border Services Agency is tasked with monitoring our borders, but at the Port of Montreal, there are only 5 CBSA agents to inspect the huge amount of containers going from that port abroad. We want 75 agents hired. That's what the Leader of the Opposition has suggested. Will the Prime Minister listen to these suggestions? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, at our meeting on Thursday, with the Montreal Chief of Police and other partners. What we will discuss is how we can better crack down on car theft. I also visited the Port of Montreal with my colleague, the Minister for Transport, a few weeks ago. The good news, Mr. Speaker, is that we saw a lot more than 5 Border Services agents working on this alarming situation. We will continue to increase staff at the Border Services Agency. The Conservatives cut those.
The Honourable Member, yesterday our leader proposed other options to correct the government's errors. More severe convictions, for example, 3 minimum years in prison if you steal a car. By making savings elsewhere, because yes, we can save money elsewhere. It's possible we can buy 24 scanners that would be in Montreal's ports and other ports to control these containers. Will the government listen to the Leader of the Opposition's proposals and bring it to their summit on Thursday so we can finally put an end to car theft in Canada? The Honourable Minister for Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, I'm very happy to note how interested my colleague is in our summit on Thursday. His leader minimized the meeting by saying it's a bunch of bigwigs who would just chat away in Ottawa. I wouldn't call these kind of people a bunch of bigwigs because they want to be partners with the federal government. Mr. Speaker, on Thursday, we will be having concrete discussions in order to reduce this scourge, significant scourge here in Canada, and we'll continue to invest ever more.
The Honourable Member from Port Moody, Coquitlam.
Everyone should be treated with dignity and respect. Yet Canadians living with a disability have been deplaned on a catering cart or forced to get on their hands and knees to crawl off a plane. Some of these dehumanizing experiences happened under the watch of Air Canada's CEO, and this Liberal government is doing nothing about it. They continue to give CEOs a free ride, even handing them billions of taxpayers' dollars. Will the Liberals stop protecting rich CEOs and start protecting people with disabilities?
The Honourable Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, airlines can do better and have to do better. That's why I convened the team from Air Canada, the CEO and others to come here and meet me with my colleague a couple of weeks ago. That's fundamental. What we have seen in the papers and through meetings, totally unacceptable. Not only Air Canada, but all the companies also, Mr. Speaker. And once again, they have to do better and they will do better.
The Honourable Member from Vancouver East.
Palestinian Canadian families are desperate to bring their loved ones to safety in Canada. The rollout of the special immigration measure for Gaza is riddled with problems. People have been rejected without any explanation. Some are rejected and later approved with exactly the same application. Now officials are saying the 1,000 cap is almost reached. Yet many have not received the code from IRCC to move on to the next stage. What action is the minister taking to clean up this mess, and will he remove the arbitrary cap without further delay to save lives?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Mr. Speaker, that is precisely what this measure is about. It's about saving lives in the face of a humanitarian catastrophe. We have said time and time again, we will be flexible about the 1,000-person cap. Right now, the challenge is actually getting an initial list of people out that are pre-approved across the RAFA gates. I'm extremely disappointed with local authorities that we have not been able to get this through, but that will not prevent us from trying. It is very difficult to extend these programs when we can't even get people out. I'm frustrated at it. We are in this House. I would use stronger words outside it, but we need to get those people out and into safety. Thank you.
The Honourable Member from Cloverdale, Langley City.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday we started debate on the First Nations Clean Water Act, an important piece of legislation that I look forward to studying at committee in due course. But it seems like every time we want to move forward on reconciliation, Conservatives want to keep us in our colonial past. The very first time a Conservative MP rose on this bill, they accused First Nations of burning down their own water systems. To the Minister of Indigenous Services, how will this legislation make long-term drinking water advisories in First Nations communities a thing of the past?
Hear, hear. Honourable Minister for Crown Indigenous Relations.
Very much, and thanks to the member for Cloverdale Langley for caring so much about access to clean water for First Nations, something that we should all care about, Mr. Speaker. It was very disappointing yesterday on the first day of the second reading of this bill that the Conservative member blamed First Nations for their lack of drinking water, and I guess it's easier to do that than to look in the mirror, because, Mr. Speaker, in 2015, when we took office, there were 105 long-term boil water advisories. Now, 96% of First Nations communities have access to clean water, and we will not rest till we get it done. This bill will help.
The honourable member from Oxford.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Liberal NDP government, auto theft is up over 200% in the GTA. Canadians are waking up to their cars being stolen from their driveway, and they're watching them being shipped out to Africa and Dubai. Even the former Liberal Justice Minister had his own government cars stolen. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost, crime, or the chaos. Will this Prime Minister reverse his soft on crime, catch and release bail policies that have caused this auto theft crisis?
Great question.
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, it's very strange. The party opposite only started talking about auto theft after we announced the fact that we're having a summit, a national summit to study auto theft, to bring together all affected parties, and after we realized that it was actually under Prime Minister Harper that boots on the ground were cut. We added 1,000 more troops, CBSA, to staff the border, and we're bringing together auto insurers, we're bringing together local law enforcement, we're bringing together industry, Mr. Speaker, and we will reach a collaborative.
I'm going to encourage all members, please, to only take the microphone when you have the floor and recognized by the Speaker. I know there are some members who will even be asking questions later on. I'm certain they will want to have that same respect which is returned to them. The honourable member from Oxford.
Speaker, let me remind this Prime Minister that he is responsible for the ports, the RCMP, the CBSA, and our criminal code. Canadians are paying $1 billion more in insurance premiums because of skyrocketing auto theft claims. The Prime Minister has caused this auto theft crisis with bills like C-75 and C-5, which allow criminals to be on the streets the same day. Will this government reverse its policies and replace them with our common sense plan of jail and not bail for repeat violent offenders?
The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
Mr. Speaker, I want to stress that slogans and videos are not going to fix this very complex problem. Our approach to addressing complex problems is actually to develop a complex solution. And I will say that in Bill C-75, the very piece of legislation that the Leader of the Opposition is asking us to repeal, our government raised the maximum penalty on summary conviction for motor vehicle theft from 18 months to 2 years. So I ask, why does the Leader of the Opposition want to
The honourable member from Edmonton Millwood.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of this Prime Minister, car thefts have skyrocketed across the country, up 300% in Toronto and up over 100% in other Canadian cities. Car theft now costs the insurance industry over $1 billion a year, Mr. Speaker. That means that every Canadian is spending more every month for their insurance premiums. This Prime Minister has caused this auto theft crisis. His catch and release policies have allowed organized crime to thrive in this country. It's time to stop the crime, Mr. Speaker. When will the Prime Minister reverse his catch and release policies?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I thank my colleague from Edmonton Millwood for the question. The good news is on Thursday, representatives of the insurance industry will participate with auto manufacturers, people responsible for rail transportation, the ports, federal border services agents, the RCMP, provincial ministers responsible. Their police chiefs, Mr. Speaker, will be here because we think if we're going to do the work that Canadians expect us to do on this important issue and our government's committed to doing, we need to do it in partnership with all of the people that my colleague referred to. Good news, Mr. Speaker, that's exactly what we're doing.
Hear, hear. The The honourable member from Edmonton Mill Woods.
Mr. Speaker, while the Liberals continue to hold meetings, criminals are continuing to steal cars. After 8 years of this NDP Liberal soft on crime policies, our police forces are powerless to stop car thieves. Liberal C5 allows house arrest for these criminals, and C75 allows repeat offenders to be released on bail just hours after they were arrested. This Prime Minister has caused this crisis, and he's not worth the cost, Mr. Speaker. When will he reverse his soft on crime policies that has caused this auto theft crisis?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General for Canada.
You're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Bill C5, which you just mentioned, maintained a mandatory minimum penalty for auto theft. That's what they apparently want to repeal. Bill C75, which you just mentioned, actually enhanced the maximum penalty for auto theft, moving it from 18 months to 2 years less a day. That apparently is what they want to repeal. You don't fix this problem by suggesting redundant changes that already exist in the criminal code. You fix this problem by being the adult in the room, convening people, and coming up with a complex solution to a complex problem.
The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. Mr. Speaker, Quebec has paid $470 million to take in asylum seekers for whom the federal government is responsible. If the federal government finds it expensive to pay back, it's because we took in far more people than our fair share. Now, it's the Liberals to do their bit. To date, all they propose is insufficient funding for housing, which seems designed less to relieve the burden on public services in Quebec than to ease the mood of Toronto's mayor and make her happy. Yesterday, the Minister for Finance was due to speak to her Quebec counterpart. Did she tell him that she was reimbursing Quebecers? Finally. The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it would be useful to note that since 2015, we've invested $4.4 billion in Quebec under the Canada-Quebec Agreement. That's not chump change, Mr. Speaker. It's used to welcome immigrants and asylum seekers. Quebec's capacity is well managed by this agreement. $700 million, for example, today, without changes in immigration rates. So there's a lack of intellectual integrity from the Bloc when they say that the federal government isn't investing enough. They're constantly just looking to fight us on any subject they can. The Honourable Member for Lac-Saint-Jean. They don't want to debate. They keep talking about squabbling. Well, the federal government must also share the reception of asylum seekers with the provinces. Every time we talk about this, the minister accuses Quebec of wanting to treat immigrants like cattle. That's a lot of inflammatory rhetoric that doesn't help anyone, especially since a year ago his own government was distributing applicants between provinces. It was sending people to Ontario. If it wasn't treating people like cattle when the Liberals were doing it, well, it's not the case today. When will the minister finally divide up the intake within provinces? The Honourable Minister for Immigration. It's not with that kind of question that we'll find solutions. They're just looking for squabbles once again. Of course, as a government, we are responsible. We are negotiating with the government of Quebec. Do you know who's not there? Around the table, the Bloc Québécois. And the government of Quebec could invite them, but they don't want to invite them. Ask yourself why. We, the two governments, are rectifying the problem.
The honourable member from Dauphin Swan River, Nipawin.
Mr. Speaker, last week the Environment Minister revealed the truth about the carbon tax. I asked how many emissions are directly reduced from the carbon tax in an order paper question. This minister's response was, and I quote, "The government does not measure the annual amount of emissions that are directly reduced by federal carbon pricing." Wow. End quote. These are his words, not mine. Why is the minister forcing Canadians to pay his carbon tax if he doesn't measure the emissions he pretends to reduce?
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, what the member is saying is simply not true. Just before Christmas, we put out a study by Environment and Climate Change Canada that shows that carbon pricing will be responsible for between 20 and 30% of our greenhouse gas emissions between 2019 and 2030, Mr. Speaker. On the issue of carbon pricing and climate change, we have no lessons to take from the Conservative Party, whose official position is still today, as Alberta is suffering from droughts, as we're seeing unforeseen storms in eastern Canada, atmospheric rivers in BC, their position is still that climate change simply does not exist.
The honourable member from Dauphin Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, shame on the Liberals for telling Canadians that their costly carbon tax is reducing emissions. It's a complete scam. Wow. The minister pretends that his carbon tax reduces emissions, but now we know that the Liberals do not measure the results of their carbon tax. No measurement, no results. No wonder emissions went up after 8 years of this NDP Liberal government. Why did the Environment Minister mislead Canadians about his carbon tax scam?
Okay, I'm going to interrupt this exciting carbon tax scam. Yes, everyone's talking about this. Calgary Herald, I don't know them, but okay, this is the gist on the story. The Calgary Herald has 2 suspects were charged with conspiracy to murder Mounties, which I haven't been following this, so that's what they were charged with. 2 of the suspects during the Coutts border protest pleaded guilty Tuesday to reduced charges. So they pled guilty. So Christopher Eliza committed a charge of possession of a weapon in an unauthorized place, and Jerry Morin admitted a charge of conspiracy to traffic firearms. So check out the Calgary Herald. They have more details on this. They're the breaking news. They're the lowest one, or the Western Standard. So 3-year sentence, 3.5 years for Lysak, and about 3.5 years for Morin. The Lethbridge Court of King's Bench was told. So they'll get about a day and a half for every day they served. The other 2 accused, Chris and Anthony, they're in custody, and on allegations to conspire to murder members of the Arts. So yeah, it's 2 of them pled to lesser charges, and 2 is going forward. Is the breaking news of the last. Well, 2 of them pled guilty. They pled guilty. But that, to get 3.5 years, this is a lot better than what they were looking at, I imagine. I don't know. I haven't been following this case, but that's what the breaking news. Check out the Calgary Herald yourself. Everyone has Google here, obviously. So enjoy that. And let's watch the show. What's this? Based on SFA. I don't know what SFA means. Shit, fuck all.
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change.
Mr. Speaker, the falsehoods that we hear from the Conservative Party on the issue of climate change and carbon pricing is unseen before in the history of this country.
Evo's gotta go!
Climate change doesn't exist. That's simply not true, Mr. Speaker. They say that our plan isn't working. Our plan has allowed us to reduce.
I personally think that Minister Guilbeault is not helping the environment file by being so aggressive and unbending to people who just don't want to do it. Obviously, people, hey, if you make your money off of, one of these industries that are being targeted, of course you're going to think. And he's being too harsh on them, I believe, and it's actually counter to the green movement or whatever, the make things cleaner movement. But, hey, that's my opinion. And Guilbeault is under fire from Premier Smith of late and other premiers. They're all saying, they are saying, he doesn't play well with us. He's coming at us, and we're going to court. It's costing the government billions, and we're kind of on the side of making things cleaner. So that's where that is. And I imagine no one here in the comments except a couple liberals.
Colleagues, I'm having difficulty hearing the minister respond to the question. I'm going to ask him to start from the top. Please, can you please withhold your comments so that the speaker can hear it? The Honourable Minister for Environment and Climate Change.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, you want to know the truth? Climate change is real. That's the truth. You want to know the truth? Climate change is impacting Canadians all over the country, including farmers from coast to coast, Mr. Speaker. You want to know the truth about climate change? It's costing Canadians billions of dollars. That's the truth about climate change. Our plan is working. We are reducing emissions. We're helping Canadians with affordability. That's the truth, Mr. Speaker. Let's speak the truth.
It's not even Wednesday, and we seem to be all amped up.
That's the truth of it.
The honourable member says, wait until summer. Truer words have never been spoken. The honourable member for Dauphin River, Swan River, Neepawa.
Mr. Speaker, if the Liberals do not measure the results of their carbon tax, there are no results. The Liberals have no shame in punishing Canadians without anything to show for it. Here's something we can measure, though. After 8 years of this Liberal government, gas is up, groceries are up, home heating is up because of their failed carbon tax. Now that the Environment Minister has exposed his own carbon tax scam, will he finally axe the tax?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, it's pretty hard to take these Conservatives seriously on the cost of groceries when their senior political advisor, the senior advisor to their leader, is actually a lobbyist for Loblaws. And now it turns out that the deputy leader used to work for Walmart. So these Conservatives are opposing our historic reforms to the Competition Act, which will bring down the cost of groceries. Is that because they're taking dictation from Walmart and Loblaws and not working for Canadians?
I would think.
The honourable member from Sudbury.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, the security of our children is essential. Too often, children are affected by war. Russia's invasion of Ukraine has cost thousands of lives and continues to threaten the stability of children's lives. At the cusp of the second anniversary of Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine, can the Minister for Foreign Affairs let us know what Canada is doing for Ukraine's children? The Honourable Minister for Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've just come back from Ukraine. There are thousands of Ukrainian children who have been kidnapped and brought to Russia far from their loved ones. This is as bad as it can get. That's why we started an international coalition to bring Ukrainian children home. We will be working throughout our diplomatic network to pressure various countries to also put pressure on the Kremlin. Every child that gets home will be a victory. There's an important vote in this House. The Conservatives are faced with a historic failure. We must all support Ukraine and its children. The Honourable Member for Louise Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, after 8 years of Liberal government, there is one thing that is as true as it can get. Canadians are paying more taxes. The Liberal carbon tax is the cornerstone in the Liberal approach against climate change. But is it truly effective? That's why my colleague from Manitoba sent in a question in writing, and the Minister stated the government does not measure the annual amount of emissions directly reduced by federal carbon pricing. Why tax when you can't even measure effectiveness, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, I said it in English, and I'm overjoyed to say it in French as well. Carbon pricing. For that, we have put forward numbers. And from now to 2030, there will be a 20 to 30.
I'm going to give you this point. I know people don't understand. There's a thing. It's called parallel lines. And if you look at two parallel lines, and if one is towards the other, and you extend them far enough, they will cross. Now that's exactly what you should be thinking about when you're thinking about what's happening in the Ukraine war. Do you think that we're going to go back after Coca-Cola? Literally, Coca-Cola pulled out of the country. Do you think that it's just going to go back to normal? No, and then Russia took the factories from them and didn't compensate. This doesn't matter who president is in. We're on a trajectory here, folks, and it's going to have to take a change in their side, not ours, because our side, it seems the same, to have this go forward. And this is the one thing is we have we trade with this country. We make money off of this country, and if they go under the Russian sphere, their economy goes to zero, basically. It'll be crushed like it was before, and it won't be a big deal. But it's a pretty forward-looking nation, and thinking that we can just keep our heads in the sand and nothing will affect us is really what happened, why we had the first and second. This is what America was all about, and we're doing it again. And this is continuing on because the rhetoric is great. We got Tucker Carlson in Russia. And so the rhetoric is all great, but what it is leading to, I'll just look at the two parallel lines, because Russia didn't invade with any real reason. It was just because they could. So they will again. Any weak opportunity as America gets weaker. And so if we don't do anything to stop this, it'll just get worse for us. South Africa will go to BRICS. All these other countries, just because you buy your drugs off a guy who has an accent, doesn't mean you should be affiliated with that country. And that's what I believe is what's happening mostly. People are like, well, I like this guy. Well, that's not a country. And a Russian isn't a government official always. Like, look at how you talk about Trudeau. And do you think that every person is a Trudeau? Well, obviously not. But this Ukraine has to happen, or we will have more problems. But I know that people are short-sighted. They're not seeing the parallel line theory. I at first was exactly thinking like that, and I'm Ukrainian. But then I looked at parallel lines. This push, the only reason that this happened was because Hong Kong happened. Hong Kong happened, and you know what we did? You know what happened when we left Afghanistan? We gave them billions of dollars. That's why we're in this situation. So not doing anything, it's going to affect you more. But I know that we only think about what's in our sphere. But we have to extend these parallel lines to see how it'll affect you in the long run. But I'm not trying to you can have your own opinions, and that's great. I'm just saying my opinion, and I'm firm on it. But I don't mind anyone having differing, as long as you're Canadian. Thank you for listening and being subjected to my berating. Now let's listen to Guy berate us about not being environment enough.
30% reduction in greenhouse gases. We've already reduced greenhouse gas emissions by 30 million tonnes. There's still a lot of work to do because for 10 years the Conservatives did absolutely nothing in fighting pollution and climate change. Thanks to our programs, thanks to our actions and the actions of Canadians, we finally are starting to see results. The last thing we need is the Conservatives coming back and destroying everything. The Honourable Member for Louis Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to hear who I have before me. Is it a Minister for Climate Change who says, yes, it's on its way? Or the Minister of the Environment that said we cannot evaluate the effectiveness? Who's before us? Is it the Minister for the Environment who, when he came to power, said that was in a situation where Canada was 58th in greenhouse gas emissions, but now we are 62nd when it comes to efficiency with climate change? Why do the Liberals continue to tax without being able to evaluate what these taxes are up to? I would like just to remind all members that they need to ask their questions through the Speaker. The Honourable Minister for the Environment and Climate Change. Mr. Speaker, my honourable colleague is wrong. Every year we publish an annual report on greenhouse gas emissions. It's like Christmas, it's every year, but this is in April. I would be happy to organise for all Conservative members a meeting. All of them who are interested in climate change, I know there are not many, I'd love to have them in a meeting to talk about climate change and how we can support Canadians in order to transition towards a greener future.
De l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. J'invite tous les députés.
I ask all members to listen to their whip, who is advising all members to show decorum.
From Souris Moosemount.
Brandon Souris, Mr. Speaker. After 8 long years of this Liberal Prime Minister, many Westmen meet as the price of gas, groceries, and heat continue to rise because...
I would like to apologize to the member from Brandon Souris, and I'll invite the member to please start again from the top.
Well, Mr. Speaker, after 8 long years of this Liberal Prime Minister, many Westman families are struggling to make ends meet as the price of gas, groceries, and heat continue to rise because of this Prime Minister's carbon tax. In Brandon, the Samaritan House Food Bank gave out nearly 36,000 hampers last year, a dramatic increase of 12,000, 50% above their normal annual average. For Canadian families facing hardship, this Prime Minister is just not worth the cost. Will the Liberals give people a break and stop their April 1st carbon tax hike?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, this fall we put forward a comprehensive economic plan that included generational changes to Canada's competition law that will bring down grocery prices. The Conservative leader described that plan as, quote, a disgusting scheme. His actions make a lot more sense now that we've learned that he is advised by a Loblaws lobbyist and that his deputy leader used to work for Walmart. The Conservative leader talks a lot about powerful paychecks. Who is paying his advisors?
The Honourable Member from Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, today members of this chamber will have the opportunity yet again to advance the modernized Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. February 24th will mark 2 years since Russia's brutal, inhumane, and cruel invasion of Ukraine. Ukrainians both at home and across the Canadian diaspora have demonstrated an unwavering and inspiring will to persevere. I have seen this tenacity firsthand, Mr. Speaker, in my home riding of Winnipeg South Centre. Can the Minister of International Trade expand on the critical importance of this legislation, a piece of legislation, Mr. Speaker, that President Zelensky himself has urged us to enact? Thank you.
The Honourable Minister for International Trade.
I want to thank the member for Winnipeg South Centre. I was with him and meeting with those very excellent and wonderful Ukrainian Canadians. And to those Ukrainian Canadians in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan, in British Columbia, in Alberta, here in Ontario, and indeed across the country, I want to say to them, I hear you, we hear you. This government is going to vote today in favor of the Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement. Most of the House is going to do that. I want to ask my Conservative colleagues, I appeal to them, support Ukraine today, vote for this Canada-Ukraine Free Trade Agreement today.
The Honourable Member from Timmins, James Bay.
Jared Gerard was a beautiful young Cree artist. He died this past weekend in a horrific house fire in Peawanuck. A young woman is also dead, 3 others in hospital fighting for their lives. This government knew Peawanuck was at risk, and yet the minister nickel and dime the community over funding for a fire hall. A fire hall, that's basic stuff. People in Treaty 9 are tired of trauma and the broken promises. We need a full, comprehensive plan for fire safety in the North. No more fire deaths. Is the minister up for the job? Yes or no?
They didn't have a fire hall.
For Indigenous
Services. Oh my!
Thank you very
this
much,
is Canada,
Mr. Speaker, and I've been working with Weenusk First Nation since last year, when there was yet another tragic death in that community due to house fire. In fact, last March we airlifted in the fire truck that would help them respond. I agree that they do need a fire hall as well, and our department's working with the community to make sure that we can accelerate the work of the design, make it possible to get the equipment and the supplies there quickly, and I look forward to meeting with this member after this afternoon to talk more about this.
Good job. Honourable Member from Skeena Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, the Haida have stewarded the lands and waters of Haida Gwaii for millennia, and today their leaders continue the long journey towards restoring their inherent right of self-government. Last year, they secured legislation in British Columbia that officially recognized the Council of Haida Nation as their government at long last. Now, this is a significant step away from the colonial binds of the Indian Act, consistent with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. My question, will Canada also recognize the Council of the Haida Nation as the government of the Haida?
Hear, 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 hear. The Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations.
I want to thank the member from Skeena Balti Valley for his important question and his advocacy for the Council of the Haida Nation. Mr. Speaker, for 50 years, the Haida Nation have been on a journey towards self-governance. This recognition is long overdue and rightfully owed. Later today, I will have the opportunity to meet with the President of the Haida Nation, Gagwe Jason Aslap, to further his important work. We will continue working to advance shared priorities and strengthen our nation-to-nation relationship, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Comme il est 15h16, la Chambre...
It being 3:16, the House will now proceed to the deferred recorded division. On the motion at the third reading stage of Bill C-57, call in the members. The question is as follows.
Seconded by Ms. Anand, moved that Bill C-57, an act to implement the 2023 free trade agreement between Canada and Ukraine, be now read a third time and do pass. The 10-minute period for members voting electronically has started, and the House will now proceed to the vote for members participating in person. All those in favor of the motion will please rise.
Monsieur Trudeau.
Monsieur Trudeau.
Mr. Macaulay Cardigan.
Macaulay Cardigan.
Mr. Sajan.
Mr. Sajan.
Mr. O'Regan.
Mr. O'Regan.
Mr. Holland.
Mr. Holland.
Monsieur Duclos.
Monsieur Duclos.
Ms. Ing.
Ms. Ing.
Monsieur Rodriguez.
Monsieur Rodriguez.
Monsieur Leblanc.
Monsieur Leblanc.
Monsieur McKinnon-Gatineau.
Monsieur McKinnon-Gatineau.
Ms. Freeland.
Ms. Freeland.
Monsieur Champagne.
Monsieur Champagne.
Ms. Anand.
Ms. Anand.
Monsieur Guilbeault.
Monsieur Guilbeault.
Mr. Wilkinson.
Mr. Wilkinson.
Monsieur Boissonneau.
Monsieur Boissonneau.
Ms. Hutchings.
Ms. Hutchings.
Ms. Tassie.
Ms. Tassie.
Mr. Varani.
Mr. Varani.
Ms. Sachs.
Ms. Sachs.
Ms. Suds.
Ms. Suds.
Ms. Jagger.
Ms. Jagger.
Mr. McKay.
Mr. McKay.
Ms. Scrow.
Ms. Scrow.
Mr. McGinty.
Mr. McGinty.
Mr. Scarpellegia.
Mr. Scarpellegia.
Mr. Vandal.
Monsieur Vandal.
Ms. Cara.
Ms. Cara.
Madame Saint-Onge.
Madame Saint-Onge.
Ms. Qualtrough.
Ms. Qualtrough.
Ms. Haidu.
Ms. Haidu.
Ms. Sahota.
Ms. Sahota.
Madame Joly.
Madame Joly.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Madame Le Boutillier.
Madame Bibeau.
Madame Bibeau.
Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
Madame Petitpas-Taylor.
Mr. Ananda Sangri.
Mr. Ananda Sangri.
Mr. Beach.
Okay, well, I'll have this in the background while we go. Thanks for watching and have a good day. It's over. That's up to the UN. I will be there. What's this? High-fiving? I don't know. The United Nations? I don't know. Get ready to freeze. Well, the... what is this? Will the Conservatives be voting for this? The big thing was the Conservatives said they wouldn't vote for it earlier. But it's because of the carbon tax, and the carbon tax See, the problem is with that argument, and I, you know, whatever. I like the Conservatives; they're doing well with their leading, but that argument, I'm sorry, it falls flat because since 2018 they've had a carbon pricing. Europe has already been sold on carbon pricing for a lot. They have a lot of higher concentration of population, so carbon is a real big deal over there, and really especially because most of their cars were diesel. So if everyone's been in the field or whatever with a lot of diesel around you, it's awful. It's really, really bad. But they're better. They're a better engine. They're louder, though. They're better on fuel. They have lower maintenance. They cost a little bit more. And they definitely have longer life. So they're better, but they're also more of a annoyance to everyone else around them, right? So Europeans had those diesel everywhere because they don't have fuel. And diesel being more efficient, everyone went to diesel, right? Because their gas prices were at $1.25 30 years ago, like a long, long time. 20 years ago when I was there, it was very high. So the Europeans are already well ahead of us on getting rid of gasoline. And I think majority of it is because they're congested, right? And they have these little tiny streets and piazzos, and people are sitting near where the roads are. It's part of Europe, so they have to, the car ruined a lot of beautiful places, little plazas in Europe, because you have to have a car to get there. Yeah, it isn't confirmed. I just was on Tucker's side. Well, maybe he did. But they are way ahead. So this is I know, whatever. Everyone doesn't like this. I got to say only good things for concern. But the problem is they've had it since 2018, a carbon tax. And then they want to get in the EU, which they have to get into the EU, which has already been basically approved and on their side. And the other side said, yeah, well, after the war. And to get in the EU, they have to have carbon pricing. And it's going to be a hell of a lot harder than what we have here in Canada. So it's a moot point. I get why they're saying. I do understand their point, and it doesn't matter. Oh, it is. Oh, yeah. 9 hours ago. Thank you, Kilo Oscar Victor. It is true. Tucker Carlson is to interview Russia's Putin. I think it'll be a good interview. It'll be interesting. Definitely. A video posted on X. Carlson said he wanted to interview because Americans have a right to know all they can about the war. Tucker, I believe, has been paid off. Come on. He got fired from Fox probably because of money. Come on, it's just obvious. Oh, nays. Yeah, so they're against